The beginning of another work week and a blessed day. Praise God. Thank you for allowing me to join you wherever you are watching today. I appreciate you and allowing me to come and give a few minutes of morning devotions. We've been talking about the call of God, and I want to continue today. But first, let me say thank God for this weekend. I want to give a big shout out to Pastor Perry Fouts and the great church in Shelbyville, Indiana. They host a men's conference every year this weekend, and I was blessed to be asked to speak on Saturday morning. Enjoyed it. Got up early, left Germantown, and drove to Shelbyville and started the first service for that Moral Man's Conference. Enjoyed it, stayed throughout the early afternoon, and Pastor Fouts, congregation, men from all the churches in the surrounding area. It was my privilege to be with you and get to be a part of that men's conference. And then on to services here yesterday, Sunday morning, Sunday night. I could just classify them as revival services. And it is building the spirit of revival. We are welcoming it into this place, and God is doing some awesome things. Well, let me jump in today on our devotion. I've been reading the same scriptures. Let me read them again to you today. Matthew 22:14. For many are called, but few are chosen. Matthew 16:24. Then said Jesus to his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, give up his hopes, dreams, plans, surrender them all to the Lord. That doesn't mean they're all gone. It means we have to give every one of them to him. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, his calling, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life will lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake, give it up, in other words, surrender, he'll find it, find real life. Romans 11:29, the gifts and the calling of God without repentance cannot turn around, go in another direction. You can't lay it down, forget about it, say, I'm done. It may change throughout your life, and often will, how it displays itself, how it plays out. But you never leave that calling. And for those that get really puffed up because they're called of God, they've accepted it. The Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 1:26, for you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God had chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. God had chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and base things of the world, and things which are despised. Hath God chosen, yea, the things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are, that no flesh should glory. No flesh should glory in his presence. So we do not glory in the flesh, no matter how talented we think we are, how astute we think we are, how elevated we think our position may be. Let us remember that God chooses the foolish things to use of this world, of which we can count ourselves as one of those. So I've been talking about 51 years ago when I started full-time ministry. I'm in the fall. I'm traveling with evangelist Terry Phillips. He's mentoring me. We spend our days studying, praying, preparing for services, and he is pouring into me, teaching me. We are in revival in Providence, Illinois. Don't look on the map. I don't think you'll find it. in the middle of farm country, a little country church. We're in revival there. And I get my first big break. People come from other churches, other pastors, lots of different churches in that area, different in their fellowship together, and they come to this little country church to be in our revival. And I am asked would it be possible to come on Friday night and preach a youth rally in Carmi, Illinois? All of the churches got together on a certain Friday night every month and had a youth rally. And so each church would come and bring their youth group. And so that was a traditional thing. There would be lots of preachers there, and I would be the speaker. So I asked Brother Terry if that was a possibility. He said, yes, you can take my car. You drive and go there. I'll stay here in revival, and you go there and do that youth rally. It's a good break for you. I studied and prayed all week. I mean, I prepared and prepared and prepared. And then I decided I needed to fast. So fasting wasn't new to me, but fasting to preach like that was. So I fasted 2 days. I fasted all day Thursday and all day Friday. And come time for me to leave, and I borrowed Terry's car and drove to Carmi. And as I drove into Carmi, I felt weak. I thought, I can never preach like this. I've made a mistake. I should have fasted earlier and then had a normal day today or some such so that I could be ready to preach. I am weak, shaky. And so I had a bright idea. I pulled into a drive-in restaurant. For you that don't know what that is, they had this awning, big row where you pull in, and you had a speaker next to you roll your window down, you have a speaker next to you, you're under this awning. It's a big line where, I don't know how many cars, 15, 16 cars probably could line up there. And so I pulled into one of those, got on the speaker, I ordered a double cheeseburger, fries, and a large Coke. And a lady brought a tray out, and you rolled your window up part way. Some of you know what I'm talking about. They set the tray on your window, and you get your food. I mean, I got that double cheeseburger, and I wolfed it down. Fries, I'm cramming them in my mouth. Oh, this feels so much better. Man, I was so weak. I needed this. I'm slurping the Coke down. I mean, I'm chugging it. Boy, do I feel better. I feel much better. So I'm done. The lady gets a tray. I pay, take off. I was 5 minutes from the church, drive into the church, come in sanctuary, we work towards, I go around greeting people. People come from, like I said, churches all around. They brought their youth groups. Pastors were there. I'm going to get to audition. That's how I felt like it was. An audition in front of all of these pastors. It's a big break for me because they may ask me to come back and preach for them later, later when I'm perhaps traveling by myself. Yep. Place was packed out, literally. Every pew filled. People were standing around the back. No air conditioning. Hot outside. The place, not only was it packed out, standing room only, but the place was blazing hot. So they had song service, sung congregationals, some specials, what have you. They turned the service to me. I felt like it's 100 degrees in there. I got up, but I had a message. I started to preach a message to young people that I thought would be a barn burner. These pastors would just love. And I started sweating profusely. Pulled my coat off, handed it to one of the preachers. The platform's full of preachers, handed it to one of them. I'm sweating. I sweat so much, my hair was matted. I mean, just, my shirt was literally dripping from my cuffs, across my chest, my back. I mean, it was soaked. I didn't know what was going on. I felt lightheaded. I tried to slow down and pace myself, but I was weak. I looked at my arm. I raised my arm like this and looked at my watch. The whole crystal was full of moisture. I had sweated through my cheap watch. I look back, there was a young couple that I met that had been to several of our revivals in that area, Philip and Mary Schlag. And they became special friends of mine. I count them, these many years later, still special friends. Mary got to the place where anytime I was around, in later years, anytime I was around, she would bake me an apple pie and bring it to, they would try to attend at least one night of any revival if I was in driving distance. And she would bring an apple pie. Just special people, wonderful people. People that, for this kid away from home and trying to work through all this, they were one of the couples that made it so much easier on me. Mary was standing in the back on the right-hand side. I looked at her, and she went and put her hand to her mouth, and just a look of shock on her face. Well, by that time, I knew there's something bad going wrong in my body. And so I started swaying around, and I was about to pass out. I turned to one of the older preachers that I knew well on the platform, sitting over there on one of the pews. I turned to him he was over here on my left. I turned to him and I said, George, his name George Cox. I said, George, you'll have to finish this message for me. And I started to move towards an empty space on one of those pews on the platform. A couple of the guys jumped up and got on either side of me, and they helped me sit down. I sat down, and sweat just poured over me. And George got up and preached a little bit on my topic, finished the message, gave the altar call, so on and so forth. And later, I sat there. I was so humiliated. My big opportunity turned into a great big flop because I didn't manage fasting, what it would do to my body, how to do, in that environment, the heat in the building, eating a ton of food after not eating for 2 days, and then grabbing greasy, nasty food and scarfing it down. Everything I did was wrong. And it made a terrible failure for me. I felt foolish. I wanted to get out of there. I didn't want to be around those people. I didn't want to listen to them after service. I didn't want nobody to feel sorry for me. I wanted to do well. I wanted to do well. I wanted to impress. And I know. But I felt like it was an audition for future references. And you know what? It really was. And I was humbled. I did terrible. But some way that night God gave me favor in spite of all that. And many of those preachers, later years, I would preach for because they wanted me to come. So I tell you that story to tell you that the Lord knows each of us. And when you accept that calling, He has to mold you. He does it in many ways. We sit under teachers, mentors, take classes, study, pray. All of that's part. But He also takes you down a path and makes sure that you remember that it's Him and not you. And your purpose is to reach people and give them a word from the Lord and not climb a ladder, a profession, not be famous, not get lots of bookings in this realm of what I was doing at that time. Not make a name, let me say it, but to lift up His name. So for all of you that teach classes in Sunday school, that does children ministry, youth ministry, the pastor, associate pastors, do visitation ministry, bus ministry, elder ministry, whatever kind of ministry it is. Just remember this. When we accept that call is to lift Him up, not ourselves. And that call allows, fully committed to it, allows God to take you down paths, to take out things that don't need to be there and to put in things that do. And the children's song from many years ago, He's still working on me. Well, let me tell you something. As long as you walk in a calling, He's still working on you. Bless you. See you tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and we'll talk more about the calling.